My name is Dave. I get to be one of the pastors here at Mosaic, and I love that you're here on this hot Sunday. But as we say, a church that sweats together, stays together, sticks together, actually. That's more appropriate. Hey, it's good. If you were with us over the last few weeks, you would already know that we are in a series through the book of Daniel in the Old Testament. We're looking at a story that is 2,600 years ago from a young, well, actually, he started out as a young teenager. Daniel, he was taken captive by the Babylonians when his own nation was invaded. And he grew up in a country far away from home. He grew up as a God-fearing man in a godless world. And I know it's an old story, it's an ancient story, but as we already discovered, there's actually a lot of things we can draw from this story, because many of you might feel like, well, here I am trying to follow Jesus in a city like Berlin, where not many other people are trying to follow this Jesus. How do I do that? How do I survive in a world where people have different worldviews and different ideas and different understandings of how things are run? And so we can learn a lot from Daniel. Last week, if you were here, we had quite a fascinating story of King Belshazzar. Remember him? Belshazzar, he was the guy that was king, and he was drinking with his friends, and suddenly there was a writing on the wall appearing. Out of nowhere, a hand showed up and was writing on the wall. Kind of a bizarre story. But what was prophesied with the writing on the wall was that was going to be the last night of him being king of Babylon. And in fact, history tells us that what happened on that night was Babylon was invaded by the Persians. So it's kind of like Iran was invading Iraq today. Those are the two tribes that are still existing in the world today. Okay, so Babylon invaded by the Persians, and that was the end of that great Babylonian empire. That's where we ended with last week. And today we're going to continue with this story. So Daniel is still involved, but now there is a new boss. There's a new king on the throne, and his name is Darius the Mede. Darius is now the new king, and he has, because that's what you do when you become a new king of a new country, I guess you clean house and you restructure and you put in your people to rule with you. And so what he does is he divided up this whole big empire of Babylonia into 120 provinces, and then he put leaders in charge of each of those provinces. Those leaders were called I looked it up, they were called the satraps. That's a word you've never heard before, right? Let's say it together. Satraps. 1, 2, 3. Satraps. All right, that's what the Babylonian or the Persian name, I guess, for those leaders of those 120 provinces. And ruling those 120, he put in place 3 governors that were now kind of in charge of these 120. One of those 3 was Daniel. So you might think, hold on, he grew up in exile as a captive, and now, yes, he worked himself up quite the ladder, quite a bit in Babylon and now Persia, that he now was one of the king's sub-rulers, one of the governors overseeing a third of the empire. It's quite impressive. Darius, we know Darius favored Daniel. He liked him for several reasons. First reason was Daniel had professional competence. He was just a really, really good, intuitive, wise leader. He also had personal character. Professional competence, personal character. He had integrity. But then also the third thing was he had a public commitment to God. Okay, public commitment to God. So professional competence, personal character, public commitment to God. That's a good combination, guys, for those of you who are maybe thinking about how do I stand out in the workplace? Well, get competent, have character, and also don't be afraid to talk about your God. Everybody knew where Daniel was at when it comes to faith. He prayed in public, he confessed, he spoke about his God. He was not ashamed of his faith in God. Now, the problem was that among the 120 satraps, there were some among them who did not like Daniel. We don't really know why. Maybe they were jealous of his position. Maybe they wanted to have his corner office. Maybe they didn't like the fact that he was a foreigner who was now overseeing them. Some of you maybe had that problem in your workplace where you were in charge of projects and people, and some people did not like that simply because you're not from here. Yeah? Oh, yeah? So that. Maybe we don't know really what the issue was, but the satraps wanted to Get it? The satraps wanted to set a trap. Get it? Get it? Oh, come on. I was looking forward to that one all week. The satraps wanted to set a trap. Oh, come on. Oh, never mind. Okay. It wasn't even ChatGPT. I came up with it myself, guys. Come on. The satraps wanted to write it down, send me an email, whatever. So they wanted to set a trap. It was like they were thinking, okay, let's scheme. Let's make a plan. How do we get rid of Daniel? We don't want him as boss. He doesn't make us look good. The problem is we can't get rid of him because the guy is flawless. Like, he has the competence. He deserves to be there. He also has the character. He deserves to be there. How do we get rid of this guy? And so they were starting to dig a little bit, trying to see if they find any skeletons in his closet. You know, they were doing what we call a background check. But, I mean, it says a lot about Daniel that they were digging and digging and digging and they couldn't find anything. Like, that's an honorable man right there. That's a trustworthy man, a consistent man when you dig and you can't find anything about this guy. In fact, it says in one of the verses in chapter 6, it says, Daniel, he was neither corrupt nor negligent. Neither corrupt nor negligent. Corruption is the sin of commission, when you do something wrong. Neglect is the sin of omission, when there's something that you should be doing and you're not doing it. Okay? So they were looking, it was like, is there anything that Daniel did that he shouldn't have done? No. Is there anything that he should have done that he forgot to do? No. Like, he was neither corrupt nor negligent. Like, you look at this and like, why did you hate Daniel? Like, he was such an honorable man. He didn't hurt anybody. He hasn't done any harm to anybody. He was innocent. Why do you have beef with Daniel? What's your problem? Maybe a tougher question is, why did people have beef with Jesus? How could they have crucified Jesus? He was innocent, never hurt anybody, never did harm to anybody. How could they have done this? But yet they did. And so jealousy and distortion actually gets you to do things you actually shouldn't be doing, right? So they were plotting, they were thinking, what can we do? He's flawless. How do we, there's no skeletons in this closet. How do we get to him? And then one of them says, aha, I know. Daniel, it's his faith, right? He only worships the God of Israel. He doesn't bow. He's unbowed in Babylon. He doesn't bow to any of our gods. Somehow, let's see if we can kind of trick him there. Maybe that can be his weak spot. Maybe that can be his downfall. And so what they decide to do is they go to the king, Darius, and they say to him, oh, great king, you are so amazing. And he was like, oh yeah, say more stuff like that, you know. And so, yes, you are so wonderful. In fact, we have all agreed together that for the next 30 days, all of us, everyone in your kingdom, should pray to nobody but you. We're going to make you a god, king, you know, like the Egyptians did. And we're going to worship you. And so they were playing with his ego. And they knew, well, probably most people would be fine with this. It was polytheistic culture. People were worshiping all kinds of stuff anyways. And, you know, why not? For 1 month, we'll just pray to this guy. But they knew there would be one person who wouldn't do it, Daniel. And so that's how they were going to trick him. And so they said, actually, let's put it in writing. Let's turn it into a law. For the next 30 days, everybody prays to no one but to you, King Darius. And let's just say, for those who refuse to do that, we'll put them in the lion's den. And the lions can eat. They had a lion's den, apparently, where there were animals that were being starved to become an instrument of execution. And so they said, hey, whoever doesn't bow to you, who doesn't pray to you alone, we will put them into the lion's den. And so what does Daniel do when he hears of this law that is being signed by Darius? Does he appeal to the king? He's like, hey, you really shouldn't be doing this. Does he protest with a sign? Does he use a hashtag on his Instagram? Don't do this. You know, does he fake pray? Maybe that's what I would have done. I was just like, oh yes, pray to you. But really in my heart, I pray to my king. You know, like, it's inside. Can you just fake pray, you know? Does he pray in secret to God of Israel? What does he do? Let's read now. Daniel chapter 6, verse 10, up on the screen. So if you have a piece of paper, you can read along as well. Verse 10, when Daniel learned that the law had been signed, that you don't pray to anybody but to the king, he went home and knelt down to pray. I think this is funny. Isn't it? This is a bit funny. He just heard, I'm not supposed to pray. So what am I going to do? I'm going to go pray. I'm going to go home to pray. I'm going to do the exact same thing I'm not supposed to do. He knelt down to pray in his upstairs room with the windows open towards Jerusalem, towards where the temple is, towards home. That's where he prayed. Like, God, this is my home. And he prayed 3 times a day, just as he had always done, giving thanks to his God. In the book of Acts, Peter at some point says, we have to obey God rather than men. I think this is one of those principles seen here in the life of Daniel. And as he was praying, it says, the officials went together, that's now the satraps. They went together to Daniel's house, and they found him praying and asking God for God's help. So they went and told the king, hey, king, that man Daniel, he's one of the captives from Judah. He is ignoring you and your law. He still prays to his God 3 times a day. And then it says, hearing this, the king was deeply troubled. Why? Because he realized he's been played by the satraps. He likes Daniel, and now he had actually signed his death warrant, his execution, with this new law. And so he was annoyed with himself. He was sad for Daniel, and it says he tried to think of a way to save Daniel. He spent the rest of the day looking for some way to get Daniel out of his predicament, but because he's put it in writing, he had to keep his word. So verse 16, at last the king gave orders for Daniel to be arrested and thrown into the den of lions. The king said to him, may your God, whom you serve, continually rescue you. If you have one of those pieces of paper or in your Bible, would you circle or underline the word continually? We're going to come back to that in just a second. May your God, whom you serve, continually rescue you. A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den. The king sealed the stone with his own royal seal and the seals of the nobles, so that no one could rescue Daniel. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night fasting. He refused his usual entertainment, which would have been music, food, dancing, all of those things, the evening program for the king. He didn't want it, and he couldn't sleep at all that night. It was a sleepless night in Babylon. Everybody was awake. Darius was worrying. The satraps were celebrating. Daniel's friends were praying, probably. The angel, as we find out in a second, he was busy protecting, fighting the cats. I think the only person who was sleeping that night in Babylon was Daniel, all snuggled up with the lions. Everybody else was wide awake. Let's continue. The very next, verse 19, very early the next morning, the king got up and he hurried out to the lion's den. When he got there, he called out in anguish. Just picture this. He's calling out, the stone removed again. He's kind of calling into the dark den, like the pit, yeah? And he calls out, Daniel, servant of the living God. Well, it's quite a statement here, isn't it? From a pagan king. Servant of the living God, was your God, whom you serve so faithfully, whom you serve continually, able to rescue you from the lions? Daniel! Imagine this. Pause. Good morning. What? Yeah. Remember these, just thinking of this, the ayo, ayo. That's how I picture it, That's like, Daniel, ayo, you shouldn't be here. Was he able? And Daniel answered, long live the king. May God send his angel to shut the lion's mouth. My God sent his angel to shut the lion's mouth, so that it did not hurt me, for I've been found innocent in his sight, and I have not wronged you, your majesty. The king, it says, was overjoyed, and he ordered that Daniel be lifted from the den. Not a scratch was found on him, for he had trusted in his God. Then the king gave orders to arrest the men, the satraps, who had maliciously accused Daniel. And this next bit is a bit hard to read. It says, he had thrown them into the lion's den along with their wives and children. The lions leaped on them and tore them apart before they even hit the floor of the den. That is rough. Whenever stuff like that shows up in the Bible, it's not that the Bible actually applauses or condones, like kind of says this is a good thing that happened here. It's just the Bible is being real with us that ancient kings were brutal kings. And when somebody was punished, often the entire family, even the kids, were punished so that no one ever has the idea to avenge in the future. It's brutal. It's distant for us to read, but it's a reality, I guess, back then. So these satraps and their families were killed by the lions. And then it says, King Darius sent this message to the people of every race and nation and language throughout the world. The God of Daniel is the living God, and he will endure forever. His kingdom will never be destroyed, and his rule will never end. He rescues and saves his people. He performs miraculous signs and wonders in the heavens and on earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. Boom. It's quite a story, right? Why is this a children's story? Can anybody explain this to me? Because this is a horror story in so many ways. It's brutal, isn't it? It's a brutal story. Well, let's look at it. Over the last few weeks, I believe we have gotten to know Daniel already quite a bit through the various stories. And I think one thing we can all agree on is that we would say, Daniel, he was a man of God, right? He was a man of prayer. He was one who walked with God. He was filled with the Spirit of God. And we need to remember what's remarkable about that is that Daniel lived his life in exile, in captivity. He lived his life in a city and in a kingdom that was very unpredictable. There was always changes, and his city and his world were always reinventing itself. And now here's another king, and things are different again. And his world was constantly shifting. He had to deal with changes and with challenges. But if there's one word that would describe Daniel, I think it would be the word consistent. Would you agree? He was consistent. He just did not flinch. He was not a chameleon kind of believer who was like, oh, now I'm going to be this, now I'm going to be this. Now he stayed true to himself, which is why also Darius says this thing about Daniel is like the God whom you serve continually. Continue. What an amazing thing to say about someone. I wish people would say that about me. Like David, may the God whom you serve continually, consistently. That's remarkable, isn't it? He, in the midst of a constantly changing Babylon, he continues to have a consistent kind of faith. And as much as possible, I want that to be true for us at Mosaic as well. As we live our lives in a city that is constantly changing, may we be believers, may we be Christians who are consistent, we're predictable. We're not unpredictable like this city is. We're predictable because we live our lives according to this book. We're not, Kinder Egg Christians, where the label Christian is on top of it, but then when you unpack it, you never really know what's inside. There are some Christians in some churches, they have the label Christian, but you don't really know what's inside until you unwrap it. I don't want us to be like a surprise. I want people to know that they're Christians, they're predictable, they're consistent, they are steadfast, they are unwavering, they are determined, they are unshakable. So what we see in the life of Daniel, the first thing, if you want to write this down, is he had an unshakable faith. An unshakable, like a consistent, unshakable faith. And that's how he got caught, actually. That's how they could catch him, because they were saying, well, the one thing we know about Daniel is he is so consistent. He prays 3 times a day. What did it say? Just as he had always done. Now, Daniel, it seems like every day he was praying for three times a day. I don't think it's because he was legalistic about it. It's like, oh, I have to do this to appease God. I think he knew, if I'm going to survive Babylon, the only way I'm going to survive Babylon is on my knees. If I'm going to survive Babylon, I have to do it in prayer. Now, to pray 3 times a day, do you think if you would do that would change your life? So, well, I do pray, So when I mean pray, I don't just mean praying for like a parking spot when you're like looking for parking. I mean like to actually take out time and to get on your knees and to go, I'm going to seek God. I'm going to look to Him. I'm going to pray to Him. If you were to do that 3 times a day, do you think it would change your life? Do you think it would help you to be more determined? Do you think it would help you to live for God in the city of Berlin? Do you think it would help you in your walk and in your witness and the people around you? Do you think it would make you more confident in the God who is with you? Maybe you want to write this down. The more you pray, the more confident you become. The more you pray, the more confident you become. I don't mean self-confidence. I mean God confidence. Okay? The more you pray, the more God confidence you have. Like, God is with me. There's something that happened here that I think Daniel is teaching us. For some of us, I'm going to include myself in this. For some of us, this is exactly the problem. We want to have an unshakable faith, but sometimes the only time we pray is on Sundays in church. The only time we talk to God is on Sundays in church. Come on, am I too honest? There are weeks when we're just so busy and so distracted, and we forget to pray. And then we wonder why our faith is not unshakable. Daniel's faith was unshakable because he had a personal prayer life. It wasn't just a Sunday corporate prayer life. It was a personal prayer life. He was steadfast in prayer. He went to his room, closed the doors, fell on his knees, said, Lord, help me. Lord, help me. He didn't need a piano for that, or a guitar, or a pastor, or this room. He could do it in his home. I believe this may not be for all of us, but for some of us, this may be an invitation here in this story, where God, I believe, is saying to you, I want to have personal time with you. I'm inviting you for one-on-one time with me. Like, the group dating here is fine. But you can also make this a whole lot more personal, because God wants to meet with you in your home, in your everyday life, okay? The other thing I think we could say about Daniel is he's walking in the Spirit of God. He's walking in the Spirit of God. Now, what do I mean by that? I'm now using language from the New Testament to walk by the Spirit. If you know the New Testament, there's a passage in the book of Galatians where the Apostle Paul, he paints a picture of, just bear with me, he has these two ways to live. And he says, one is you walk by the Spirit, and he says the other is you walk by the flesh. Now, that's language that we don't normally use. So what does he mean by that? He says, when you walk by the flesh, Paul says, it's like you are led by your own sinful desires. Your own sinful desires. I thought my nose is bleeding. So if it is, I'm sorry. So sinful desires. And you basically give in. What comes out of your life when you're led by your sinful desires, what comes out of you is things like lust and envy and hate and selfishness and all of these things. To walk by the Spirit is the exact opposite. What walks by the Spirit is you're not led by your sinful desires, you're led by the Spirit of God. And what comes out of your life then is what's called the fruit of the Spirit. Galatians 5, read it out maybe. And it's things like love and joy and peace and kindness, patience, all of these things, they come out of your life if you're being led by the Spirit, okay? And this is this vision, I think, for what life with God looks like, for what discipleship looks like. It's you live your life in proximity, in such close proximity to God that you are being changed from the inside out. You're being transformed. And what naturally and unstoppable comes out of you is this fruit of the Spirit, and what that produces is an unshakable kind of faith, a consistent kind of faith. Does that make sense? A little bit? Okay, let me move on. A consistent faith, number 2, calls out an unrelenting enemy. It calls out an unrelenting enemy. Now, who are the enemies? Now, I'm not talking about the satraps now. I'm not even talking about the lions. I'm talking about an enemy that I think is in the story, even though is not named in the story, but we can see him behind the scenes. It is the enemy that you and I also have, that is kind of lurking in the shadows of the unseen world. It is the devil, Satan, Lucifer, some people would say. Now, I know it's like, it's getting dark at Mosaic today. We're talking about the devil now at Mosaic. Let's just talk about this for a moment if we can, because he's mentioned here, and we can see him, I believe, in this story as well. Now, Satan or Lucifer, Bible tells us he was an angel who he was jealous of God, basically. And he tried to overthrow God. So he mobilized around a third of the angels to get behind him. And they tried to kind of have a coup in heaven. And he wanted to be on the throne of heaven, which obviously didn't work. It was a stupid idea in the first place. As a consequence, he and also the other angels, which we now call demons, they were cast out of heaven, which is also why there is an obscure verse in the New Testament where Jesus says, I saw Satan fall from heaven like lightning. I saw it when he was kicked out of heaven. What's that all about? Now, when it comes to the devil, when it comes to Satan, most Christians do one of two mistakes. First mistake is we downplay his existence and we actually say, nah, it doesn't really exist. Who still believes that? That's primitive. That's medieval thoughts. Who still believes in something like the devil? That I don't want to believe this. I'm more educated than this. I want to say to you, if this is where you're camping, I want to say to you, maybe the devil's greatest trick that he ever pulled was convincing you that he doesn't exist. Okay? The other group is the exact opposite. Those are Christians who somehow develop an obsessive fascination with all the unseen things and all the spiritual things and all the dark things, and they're obsessed with it and fascinated by it. I think also not so healthy. So we don't have to get weird about it. We also don't have to be afraid of it or deny it. I just wanted to be honest about it, okay? I think there's 3 things you need to know about the devil, very quick. You need to know that he's real, and he's crafty, and he's defeatable. He's real, he's crafty, and he's defeatable. If you forget or deny any of those 3, he will eat you alive. You've already lost. He's real, he's crafty, and he's defeatable. Okay? He's an unrelenting enemy with an unrelenting strategy that Jesus tells us that he comes to kill, to steal, to kill, and to destroy. To steal, to kill, and to destroy. In other words, he does not want us to walk with this Spirit. He does not want us to produce the fruit of the Spirit. He wants us over here. He wants us to walk in the flesh and just give in to our own desires. And so as long as we are here, he's happy. Okay? So he's looking at someone like Daniel. He's looking at Daniel's life, and he's saying, how can I stop him? He's annoying me. He's so consistent. He has an unshakable faith. I need to get him disconnected. I want to get him over here again. I don't want him walking with God. Now, I need to illustrate this a little bit, and so I'm going to just ask maybe some big guys to come help me. So I'm just looking. Ben, can I ask you to come up? Alan, can I ask you to come up? And just, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't have to say anything. You just come up. Yeah. Is that all right? It's just, I was looking for 2 big guys. So there's applause for Ben and Alan. Is that all right? Yeah. Okay. So stand over here. So, yeah. Just have you. So, hi, welcome back. So let's just assume I'm Daniel, okay? And Ben, you're God, okay? And Alan, because you have tattoos. Just, let's just play. Sorry, stupid. You're going to play the devil, okay? Well, I'm going to start with you. So I'm Daniel, and I live my life. Let's do it. Come on. Let's come in. I live my life. I walk with God, okay? And so we go through life, and I enjoy the proximity to God. You look very, okay. And so, and so the cool thing about being disconnected is because we're connected, anything I touch is also touched by Him. It's also touched by God. So my relationship are also influenced and touched by God. My leadership is also influenced and touched by God. The way I eat even, we see with Daniel, not with me, but with Daniel, we see it. With me a little bit, but with you as well. But with Daniel, because of his diet, like it was touched by everything. He allowed the Spirit of God to integrate every area of his life, and so whatever Daniel touched, God was touching as well. Okay, and that's where the power was. Now the enemy comes, and the enemy comes. And he doesn't like this. So what he wants to do is not just to distract me. He tries to get in between me and God. And he tries to get us disconnected. So how would you do that? Just, okay. All right. Try to get us, we're still connected. Try to get, okay. Yes. All right. So no, I mean, yes, but that's exactly. So now we're disconnected. So stand over here, turn around. Like, because theater, you always never show them the back. Okay. So yeah. It's good. So now we're disconnected. And that's a problem. Maybe, have you ever had this crisis of being disconnected? When maybe you were driving in the middle of nowhere in Brandenburg, and your phone is down to 2%, and you rely on the map of your phone to tell you where to go, but you're in Brandenburg and you're down to 2%, and you don't have a charger with you. That's when you know, oh my goodness, if I'm going to get disconnected here, I'm going to be in trouble. I'm going to have a problem. If I'm disconnected, I have a problem. And so what the enemy wants to do is he wants to get me down to 2%. He wants to get me down to 2%. He just wants to get me bitter enough about life so I stop praying to him. He wants to get me busy enough with life so I stop going to a small group that would encourage me in my walk with God. He wants to get me occupied enough with your opinions about me so I no longer have time to think about God's thoughts about me. You hear me? And so I'm disconnected, and he wants me to have issues with God, where I'm frustrated with God. He wants me to forget all the good things he has done for me. He wants me to get disconnected from his word. He wants to get me disconnected from his people. He wants to get me disconnected from the source of life. And here's the thing about the fruit. Maybe you know this passage in John chapter 15 where Jesus talks about the vine and the branches. It's when you're disconnected, when I'm disconnected from the branch, from the vine, when I'm the branch, I'm disconnected from the vine, I cannot bear fruit. I cannot bear fruit. Jesus says, apart from me, you can do nothing. Apart from me, you can do nothing. And so he's trying to get in between, just trying to disconnect us. And so what he wants to do, what he wants to do with Daniel is that I want to get Daniel into the lion's den, but I want to get him into the den disconnected from God. Now, what did Daniel do? Daniel said, if I'm going to go to the lion's den, I'm taking him with me. If we're going to face the lions, we're going to face them together. Because he's a big guy as well. I picked well earlier, right, didn't I? Yes. So we're going to go face the lions together. I'm not going to go alone into the lion's den. And then what do we read? Like he's being thrown into the lion's den, and Daniel is not, like they don't even bite him. Have you noticed this? They don't even bite him. Now, why is that? Some people say it's because the lions weren't hungry. They've already eaten somebody else that day, and so they were full. That we know that is not true because not 24 hours later, when the satraps were lowered into the den, they were eaten mid-air, all right? Their feet didn't even touch the floor yet, and they were already breakfasting on them, okay? So it's not like they were not hungry. I heard a preacher say, the lions didn't eat the... stay with me, stay with me. I need you here. Come on. Yeah. But I just felt we're touching too much there. I don't want you to be uncomfortable. But I once heard a preacher say, somebody said that the lions didn't eat Daniel because lions don't eat fruit. Get it? Yeah? If Daniel would have been walking in the flesh, the carnivores, the lions, they would have been feasting on him. They would have devoured him. But because he's so full of the Spirit and so much fruit coming out of his life, that's why basically he ruined their appetite. They're like, no, it's vegan. We don't want that. No. So, but I don't think that's it. I don't think that's it. Why was Daniel not eaten? It's because God came with him. Not God in person, but a representative of God. God sent one of his angels. Daniel had divine backup. He had a heavenly covering. He had, remember that it says that the king, Darius, he put a stone in front of the entrance, put a seal so that no one would mess with the fate of Daniel. Well, it did not stop the King of Kings to send one of his angels to put a pack of lions on a leash and close their mouth. They would have eaten him, but there was an angel that closed their mouth all night, so Daniel was safe. Give it up for these guys. They've done so well. Yes. You want to hold my hand? Yeah. Oh, sorry. Okay. Right. So an angel showed up. Angels do so much more than singing. Sometimes we think, well, angels are the ones that are playing harp and they're singing. That's one thing they do, but they also do so much more. One of the other things they do is they are protecting us, and they are pulling us out of situations that we shouldn't survive. Some of you are in a situation right now where you don't know how you're going to survive it. Some of you are anxious right now because of something that's happening in your life right now, a relationship thing or a health diagnosis or something. There's an amazing verse in Psalm 91 that I encourage you, even as I'm going to read it, close your eyes and receive it as God's promise to you. This is especially if you are sick, if you are anxious, if you are struggling with feeling powerless, or simply if you have children and you worry for them. Here's the verse, Psalm 91:11. He will order his angels to protect you wherever you go. Isn't that an amazing promise? It's not just poetic. For Daniel, this was prophetic. Okay, this was written before Daniel. But this was like, he will order his angels to protect you wherever you go. And that's where you find peace. Peace is not necessarily found when your circumstances change. Peace is found when you know that you're covered, even in the midst of scary circumstances. I'm covered. I can have peace. Real quick, number 3. You're still with me? Yeah? Okay. Real quick, number 3. An unshakable faith calls out an unrelenting enemy, but always invites an unchanging God. An unchanging God. All 3 are consistent. All 3 are consistent. An unshakable faith calls out an unrelenting enemy, but always invites an unchanging God. Mosaic, we have a God who is an unchanging kind of God. Anybody believe this today? Say amen. Yes, we have a God. If you don't know him, try. I think you will get to know him and you will find he is an unchanging kind of God. He is a faithful God. He says to you, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. No matter what season you are in, I will remain the same. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. God is a faithful God. He is a good God, and he shows up every time. But here's the thing, an unshakable faith, you can only have an unshakable faith when you know that you have an unchanging God. When you're not sure about your God, when you're not sure, oh, hopefully my God is merciful, but maybe he isn't, you will never have an unshakable faith. It's only when you know for sure that God is an unchanging God that you can have an unshakable faith. You know, and that you know that, okay, my God, he will show up. And he did show up in this story. How did God show up? God showed up actually through the life of Daniel. God showed up. Like, it's amazing. At the end of the story, we had this wonderful testimony from King Darius who says, the God of Daniel is the living God. How did he come to this revelation? He hasn't read the Bible. How did he know this? He knew it from the life of Daniel. Daniel was the only Bible he ever read. Some of you are the only Bible that some other people in your circles will ever read. God wants to use your life to, through your life, display to others his greatness, his faithfulness, his glory, and his power. You hear me? God wants to use your life to put himself on display, to reveal himself to others through your life, so that others around you will also say, like King Darius, well, the God of Reuben is the living God. The God of Tim, he's the living God. The God of Yen, he's the living God. I see it in them, so it must be true. Isn't that amazing? Now, the truth of the matter is this, let's be honest. God doesn't always keep you out of every pit and every lion's den in your life. Like I said, some of you might feel like, well, I'm in a lion's den at the moment. Some of you have names for your lions. My boss, my spouse. No, I don't know. You have names for your lions, you know. Sometimes God allows you to be thrown into a pit so that he can miraculously rescue you out of it so that others, through that, can see his glory. You get me? Let me say it again. Sometimes God allows you to be thrown into a pit so that he can miraculously rescue you out of it, so that through the miracle, others around you will be able to see his glory. There's an interesting story in John chapter 9 where there was a blind man, and the disciples of Jesus go up to Jesus like, Jesus, what has he done wrong that he was punished with blindness? What has he done wrong? And Jesus says he hasn't done anything wrong. He says to them, this happened so that the power of God could be seen in him. And then he gives him back his sight. This happens so that the power of God, sometimes things happen in our lives so that the power of God can be seen in this by other people around us. So as we go through this series of Daniel, we have one more Sunday left, next week Sunday. We do one more on Daniel. But I think what we can see in his life, we can see through his life the power and the faithfulness of God on display. But also, I believe if we look a little bit closer to Daniel, if we look a bit closer to this story, and maybe we turn our head a little sideways and put our glasses down a little bit, I think if we look closely, what we can see is actually Jesus on display in this story. I was like, what do you mean Jesus on display? Let me explain. Hope you can see the parallels. Daniel came from a foreign land into this land to display to the people there the glory of God. Jesus came from heaven to a foreign land to display the glory of God. And the Gospel of John says, we beheld his glory. We could see the glory of God through him. Daniel was set up by the leaders because of his faith, and they couldn't find anything in him. He was innocent, so they had to make something up. Jesus was also set up by the believers, by the leaders for his faith, and they couldn't find anything, so they had to make something up. Daniel was innocent, but even when he was accused, have you noticed this? He never said a single word when this whole thing was going down to defend himself. Jesus also, when he was being accused, when he was being in front of Pilate and in front of Caiaphas, it says he didn't speak a word. It was like Bible says it's like a sheep in front of the shearer. He just stayed silent through this whole process. Even though he was innocent, he could have defended himself. He didn't. Daniel, he was lowered into the den. Listen, he was lowered into the den. They put a stone in front of it. They put a Persian seal on top of the stone, because they all assumed on the other side of the stone would be Daniel's death. Jesus was lowered into the grave. They put a stone in front of it. They put a Roman seal on top of it, because everybody assumed on the other side of that stone would be his death. Darius, when did he go back to the lion's den? Remember this? Early in the morning, he ran back to the lion's den, had the stone removed, and he called into the dark and he said, Daniel, has your God whom you serve continually, has he rescued you? And Daniel comes out, alive and well, and he says, yes, my God has delivered you. Look, the power of God on display. Well, Jesus, early in the morning, the tomb was removed from the stone, and Jesus walked out of the tomb alive and well. And what did he say? It's like, look, behold, the power of God on display. The power of God. You can trust me. You can put your trust. I can deliver you just like I've delivered Daniel from the lion's den. I'm here for it. I have the resurrection power. I believe God wants to use your story to show the world what he is capable of, so that other people around you can also start to discover for themselves an unshakable faith. And also they will be prepared to face an unrelenting enemy because they put their trust in an unchanging God. Amen. Let's stand together and we're going to sing our closing song.